record to the cloud.
Can you give me a record permission too?
Yeah.
If you can't, whatever.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, so begin. Sorry.
So my name is Mitch Bohn. I am president of the Montana State University Billings Democrats and also a member of Yellowstone County Democratic Central Committee. And I'm here tonight with congressional candidate Tom Winter.
Hey, Mitch, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well, cooped up, but it's the right place to be.
Yes, exactly. It's where we need to be right now.
So you had, we had some questions I know we were going to go over. We had spoken before about this being a little more freewheeling. Always happy to,
Yes.
Back and forth is great. You were looking at maybe me just also telling a little bit about myself. Would that be helpful for you?
Yeah, just tell us about yourself, why you're running, what made you want to do the congressional seat over other races, and
Oh, are you talking about a stump speech? I've never done that before. I'll keep it less stunt speechy. So, so my name's Tom Winter, and I'm a 33-year-old state legislator. I currently represent House District 96, which is the western part of Missoula County. Our Montana listeners, specifically our Missoula listeners, you know where that is, but some people don't. Go to the Walmart, go west of the Walmart toward the Idaho border until you hit Huson, south of 90, stop there. So it kind of represents a district that has the state in microcosm. So it's got about a fifth of my constituents currently live in mobile home parks just along the road there. The remainder are either in kind of rural areas outside of the city and are outside in actually rural areas, or in suburban areas where kind of growing and wealthier Missoula is starting to kind of encroach on what was open lands right there. And it was a challenge to run for that. I first got involved because I really wouldn't even be here talking to you, and it still is kind of weird to me sometimes. Just to be on a Zoom meeting. I have a family member with a chronic illness, and watching how that played out in my family and just through the simple bad luck of being born one way and not the other, I find to be a defining feature of, it is political in and of itself, and the way that society not only takes care, but allows people who have had different experiences and born in different ways to excel and become their best selves is really important to me. And my state legislator at the time said he wanted to cut Medicaid expansion by 50,000 people. And he just said it at a meeting, just no big deal. And he was a Republican, and it really made me angry, truthfully. That was it. He was talking about people like my sister. He was talking about my family. He was talking about other families across the state, people who just need healthcare because they want to be healthy. And that's not wrong. And it is not freeloading, as he called it, to act as if Montanans deserve healthcare, because they do.
Right.
And so I ran against him. I ended up quitting my job. I gave 2 of my dogs on semi-permanent loan, which was terrible, to my siblings. I moved into my sister's basement. We, as a campaign, knocked 22,000 doors in a district with 4,000 to 5,000 doorknobs. Every single person saw me at least 4 or 5 times. They probably just voted for me because they wanted me off their porch. But I was able to, it was a district that had voted for President Trump plus 11 points. Missoula is not all hippie liberals, it's not what everyone thinks it is. If you've been there, it's a city that actually is large enough now to have different voices. And I respect all those voices. But I also have serious disagreements with this administration. So my constituents that I ended up winning had voted for Republican previously, voted for President Trump plus 11 points, and we still won as well. And when I say we, I mean my campaign, because this is starting to feel, it's not just about me, and it's a group of us working for something. My name's just attached to it. And so when I was as surprised as anyone that we were able to pull that off. But the way we did it was by, like I said, going door to door. And everyone says, oh, I knocked doors that other people didn't knock. I mean, we did. Don't know how many times I had the cops called on me because I was going door to door in a mobile home park. And those are places that the landlords don't really like allowing their constituents or their renters to have voices. And more on that later. But in the idea, spending time seeing how just the general way that people were so astonished that you would even come to their door and ask them a question. And more so than that, the way that I, as a candidate, would learn what was important to them and then take it to the next door. And I wouldn't break anyone's confidence, but I would say hey, this is something that's going on in your community. I know you're worried about taxes. And they would immediately say, oh, you're a Democrat, you love taxes. No, I actually don't. I want the state's money and your money to be spent wisely or not spent and kept in your pocket. And that was something that we were able to win people over who were otherwise not interested in the process, or truthfully had voted for President Trump and then voted for me, which is to my astonishment. And so I I was able to do that in the legislature. And then once I was involved in the legislature, you have some questions we're going to go into about my legislative history, so we can hit on that. But that's what got me here. And it's the profound understanding that community in Montana still matters, regardless of political party. And my candidacy in the legislature was able to prove that. And it's not a talking point, it's the real thing. So
awesome.
Long-winded response, I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. You actually went into a couple of my questions. So as you know, I also have a condition that would not be covered unless they had Medicaid expansion in Montana. And so I was just wondering what healthcare looks like, not only for Montanans, but for our country to you.
I mean, this is something I think, and you are welcome to jump in here, because this is something where you have experience firsthand with the medical system in a way I don't. What does healthcare look like? The better version of healthcare? There is not a way to not answer these questions without talking about the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. So the United States, we are one of the wealthiest countries. We are the wealthiest country on earth. We are able to control the world, yet we do not have a healthcare system that helps people who need it. It is still, your outcome is better if you are rich and worse if you are poor. Mm-hmm. That is not right. Access to, but more so the right to health and a long, fulfilling life should not be based on whether or not you or your parents have cash. We are seeing that now more so than any other time. The pandemic is only laying bare the inadequacies of the system that I've been talking about, and everyone has, including you, for quite a while. And so my campaign at the beginning, we were the only campaign to put out, and I think still are, a comprehensive policy platform. So I can't lie in this interview and then go to Glendive and say, like, I disagree with what I said earlier. I really do believe what I'm saying. And I'm taking that in consultation with people who've changed some of our platform as we've gotten more information. So anyway, healthcare is a right. We all know this. And in a pandemic especially it is. And so I am most concerned with wanting to be in Congress because I saw in the state legislature the ways that rural healthcare, and all of us, according to people on the coast, live in rural areas. I don't care if you're in downtown Bozeman or Missoula or Billings. Right. This is a profoundly rural and unusual place in the country. There is on either party, there is no one arguing for the inadequacies of rural care and what it means to change that. And I know there's changes coming. I mean, before the pandemic, there were changes coming to healthcare. You don't think after this, we're going to have a reckoning with what it means to have means test your access to a ventilator? Rich people get ventilators, poor people don't, not as much. Rich people get coronavirus tests, poor people do not as much. You and I have a bigger chance of getting tested than someone who is wealthy and connected who lives in New York.
Exactly.
And that's not a slam on New York, that's a slam on the system. I want to change that. And I have, in my legislative career, I authored 24 bills, which is more than most. And many of them, more than a dozen of them, were about healthcare. And one of them was ensuring that Montanans were protected when they have pre-existing conditions. And that was defeated by the Republicans in a party line vote. Also to ensure that they didn't have insurance, like scam insurance wasn't sold to them. That was defeated by the likely Republican nominee, Matt Rosendale. And the idea, and I'm in a primary, I can talk this way. The idea that we have one group antithetically, that it believes that the antithesis of freedom is allowing people to survive pandemics, and another that thinks we should pretty starkly say the difference between what I think Montanans will be facing in the general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of people that think that just because we're disabled or aren't able to afford the greatest healthcare in the world, that we shouldn't have it.
It is a moral question.
Yeah, and I have a personal story that I could share with you, and it would scare you regarding a politician in Montana. But yeah,
I believe you.
So, and I guess another question that you kind of alluded to in that answer is you had a lot of bills you passed when you were in the legislature. What would you say was your most significant one that you put out?
Oh, like choose amongst my children, man. And there's a lot of them. Truthfully, I think the most consequential for people was pre-existing conditions. And it's an easy one. That's like the politician's answer. But more so than that as well, I mean, I worked so hard. I wanted to be there to enable Medicaid expansion to be passed. And I gave up other committee assignments in order to get on the Health and Human Services Committee to ensure that when we passed Medicaid expansion, when we passed the re-upping of it, that it wasn't a paper tiger, if that's the right phrase, that it wasn't a lie, and that it wasn't meant to kick people off the program. Me and a group of other legislators, most of them Democrats, but also Republicans, were able to impact that legislation so that we were able to vote for it, and it passed, and 110,000 people have healthcare going into a pandemic. Now, more people need it. It's not enough. But being there and also I understood how much, because the committee hearings are oftentimes in small rooms and no one cares. That one had hundreds of people coming from across the state. And I had a colleague of mine who disagreed with people's right to be heard in that forum. And it was meaningful to me to be able to be there and say, well, I'm sorry, our job is to listen to the Montanans who have come to tell us whether or not they agree or disagree with this legislation. Now, about 5 people came saying we should not increase or continue Medicaid expansion. About 200 people showed up to say we should. And it was a clear attempt to scare voices of people who had traveled there, many of whom were ill themselves, to advocate for themselves and their families. And to be there and say that, I'm sorry, you actually don't get to just bully people and silence them in our democratic process was very meaningful. But again, I did a lot of bills. I don't know. I mean, I think they'll come up as we ask more questions, because they really touch on a lot about what this campaign's about, I think.
Right. So another thing that we have talked about in the past is the economy. And I know that with this COVID-19, the economy is going to take a big hit in Montana and the nation.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you propose to either help lessen the burden that has been caused by this, or help recoup the economy after this is all said and done?
I mean, you're going to hear me say this a lot, which is, again, the pandemic has laid the issues that we're dealing with were here before the pandemic. They will be here after, and the pandemic is laying bare the inadequacies of the system we had before. So I don't really have to change my answer for the pandemic here. Now, specifically, I mean, I think, for instance, the economy, when we ask this question, I feel like so much and so often, politicians of both parties of national stature confuse the economy, right? Well, they think that the economy is Bank of America and Boeing. We are the voters. They're misunderstanding fundamentally what it means to govern and what it means to represent people. We don't represent the economy. I represent you, and I represent your neighbors. I represent Montanans. It matters to me your take-home pay. It does not matter to me what happens to Boeing. It does not matter to me what happens to Bank of America. And that's why I understand this first stimulus this is stimulus round 1, there will be more. But the Congress voted for a stimulus package that gave $50 billion specifically earmarked to the airline industry, but did not do it for frontline grocery store workers who we will all starve without being able to get our groceries. Right. They are the idea that the people who have a seat at the table in Washington are corporations and then Congress people is the problem. And so I know you're asking, and I don't want to attack you, right? But like, asking about the economy is the problem. The question is not, how can you fix the economy? The question is, how can you make the economy work for people in Montana? Currently, it does not. And I really do, I just don't have time for the idea that you can cut apart the economy and humans. They're one and the same. The economy serves us. I don't care about the economy. I only care about the economy insofar as it helps my voters and my constituents. And in that case, we just today released a call to have rent and mortgage relief for working people in the state. That's an economic question. We were the first campaign to unionize in state history, and we're instrumental in getting the Democratic Party to unionize, to finally live up to its values. The idea that I'm walking into a system where even the Democrats haven't unionized and they claim to be friends to labor is ridiculous to me. And I'm not going to stay silent just because I'm a Democrat. Our house must be cleaned as well as the other one, because we all live in it. So you're seeing us, I think, in my response and our campaign's responses to this, to the economic questions of this, and otherwise is based on an understanding of the unfairness that was there and the unfairness that's continuing.
Mm-hmm. So then another question I have as a college student is, I've seen a lot of my friends graduate college and they haven't gotten college level jobs out of college in Montana. So as a potential congressman from Montana, what job industries could you see maybe bringing to Montana that would be college level for the graduates so that they're able to stay here.
Well, so do you mind if I take that in a few, you can tell I'm talking a lot. I'll take it in one way and tell me if I'm answering the question, because I don't want to lie.
Go ahead.
So, like, my problem in the state legislature too, and I wrote a bill for this it was based on a pioneering law that Maine had done, where they were actually able to make an economy in Maine that kept 30,000 kids who'd otherwise graduated, who graduated from Maine universities, to stay in the state rather than leave. So my issue, and it goes back to the economy, you and I are, I'm a mid-level millennial. I don't know what I am. I'm younger, but I don't know if we're the same generation, but we're close in age. And me and my friends, I also understand what it means to graduate college with a mortgage attached to you anyway. And we're the first generation to have to do that. That's where we graduate, we have to pay off our student loans. How are we also supposed to start a family and a business and buy a home if we already are paying a couple $100 a month to finance our university education that we needed to get that job in the first place?
Right.
It is a raw deal. And acknowledging that is the first step in understanding how to fix it. And so I think in the Montana context, in the state legislature, I authored a bill that did move the conversation forward. It was killed on a party line vote, sadly, to change the way that the economy works here in Montana, so that we're not educating people so that they have to leave. Because right now, all my friends, I'm the last of my people. They all left because they graduated college and couldn't afford to make the payments and live in their homes in the state they love. They all live in Seattle and Portland now because they have to be able to make enough money to come back. We all, older, younger, it doesn't matter. We do ourselves a disservice if we create a system where only wealthy people get to go to college. But even those lucky, wealthy people still have to leave Montana to make the money back that we just paid to educate them.
Yep.
And so also you'll see, like I said, our campaign has done we have a comprehensive policy platform. I'm in open support of the Student Debt Relief Act, which would fix this. And it's not a crazy plan. And it would actually, because it would right the fundamental wrong and unfairness of you and I having to pay the first mortgage on our insurance and deal with a broken healthcare system and rebuild the country after a pandemic, whereas previous generations paid $35 per credit.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not right. And the way that our parents were able to finance their lives and raise us was because they were not stuck with that same first mortgage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dad paid for an entire year of college on a summer job.
There you go. Well, I hear that all the time. Well, why can't you just get a job and fix it? Have you seen what minimum wage is versus what it costs to attend a state university?
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's a disconnect of understanding amongst different generations. And I understand that's the fault of our politics and not educating people and leveling with them on how dire the situation is. And of course, now we're in a pandemic and everything's dire. And right. I hope that we see this as this is a clarifying moment in which we have to deal in the moment with people dying who don't have to, from the federal government's lack of leadership, to also the ways that the rest of us lose our jobs and the economy falters because it was never strong enough to begin with.
Yeah. So one of my other questions that I had that has been a big part of your campaign is the climate crisis. What would be your main goals to help combat the climate crisis in Congress?
I mean, look, it's just, it's not never far from my mind as a person who's going to have to deal, as you will, with the effects of the climate crisis in the next 50 to 70 years. I mean, but we're also dealing, it's just the idea that it is astonishing to me that we're dealing with the climate crisis and the pandemic at once. Our generation, our near generation together is going to have a lot of work, have our work cut out for us to rebuild and to build a better version of what was there before. And that comes with the climate crisis. We were the only campaign, so far as I know, to not accept fossil fuel money. And that's not because I dislike the people who work in fossil fuel industry, specifically in Montana. It's because I can't be seen to be being bankrolled by organizations and corporations who do not care for the future of our state and will actively try and mitigate and work against people trying to fix the climate crisis. So, we've been hope to be in the forefront as much as we can here. I mean, the first people who are going to feel this, and it's already happening. I mean, the idea that the climate crisis is far off, it is occurring right now concurrently with the pandemic.
Right.
So it's not going to be people though that are like wealthy in other states. It's not going to be also as much you and I, like I live in Missoula. I'm a lucky guy. You live in Billings, I believe.
Yep.
It's not us in the cities that are going to feel this first and that are feeling it. It's ranchers and farmers in places that are already difficult to ranch and farm, like in Montana. Now, the problem is that they have been already robbed of a voice. And it'd be my job as a congressman to give that voice back and show what we're already losing and the cost of inaction, which is staggering. And then to continue on, the idea, and I think you're going to see, and jump in here, because this is where I'm still trying to figure out how best to describe this. And I've spoken with many people who work in Colstrip, and it's a political football that's tossed around. Their lives and livelihoods have become like something that Greg Gianforte likes to put in an ad.
Yep.
He does not care about them. He cares about winning, and he cares about demagoguing on this town. But I do. And my concern is that the people of Colstrip and of Montana and Butte, et cetera, we've seen it in Libby. We've seen it through generations in this state. Outside interests utilize our resources. They pull copper in Butte, vermiculite in Libby, coal in Colstrip. And when they don't need us anymore, they toss us to the side. Butte, Libby, Colstrip. They do it every time. And the country was only able to create Amazon and Nike because we pulled coal out of the ground in Montana, in Colstrip. We burned it here, and we sent that power to a computer monitor over in Portland for Nike and a computer monitor over in Seattle for Amazon. They built massive wealth on our backs and the people of Colstrip's back. And it is incumbent on those places and the federal government to make that right. And they're not going to. I do not see this as part of the conversation on either party. The Powder River Basin coal communities, Colstrip included, must be made whole. That is not to say that I'm saying that Colstrip needs to continue to function. I mean, Unit 1 and 2 are gone. 3 and 4 are going to be gone by 23 and 24. Their unions know this. The only way that I can be a good steward of the public interest in the town of Colstrip and in the state is to level with that community and say, this is not good. And it's my job to use the federal government to ensure that other states and other places that have gotten wealthy off the work that you did make you whole. And I really believe that. That's considered and what I'm trying to talk about and articulate is a just transition. And that includes looking out for working people. Because the only way we're going to lose the climate fight is if we continue to make it a partisan fight over Republicans saying that it's going to hurt you and it's going to make you poor, and Democrats saying, but it's for the good of the environment. It's the crisis is here. We have to deal with it. And there's just, you have to move forward. And I just am doing everything I can to articulate that well. Now, if you have questions about that, please, I'm all ears.
I guess my one question with that I was wondering and that I've heard kind of floated around a little bit, moving Colstrip away from coal and trying to do other like wind, solar type things in Colstrip. Would you be for that? So that then they still have a livelihood there, but it's not the coal industry.
I agree with you, but the thing is, and this is where I hope someone from Colstrip is watching this and they can call me and tell me. I've talked to people. I am willing to have my mind changed, but it's a lie. Wind is not going to provide enough jobs to continue Colstrip as it was. That's just the case. It takes fewer people to harvest wind energy than it does to harvest the energy of the sun than it does to pull coal out of the ground and then burn it. That's just the case. I'm disagreeing with you, I guess, but jump in. Like, I don't think it's right for us to tell them that it's going to be okay, to say it's not. It's going to be drastic, wrenching change. And you're already seeing it in that community. And that's going to happen in a lot of communities in Montana. We have to be able also, like you're saying, we have abundant wind and solar energy. We're already doing pumped hydro as a possibility coming up soon. There is the space with, I think, forward-thinking legislators to not just either sweep it under the rug or tell people we're going to fix it. We have to actually fix it. We have to make investments to ensure that Montanans can take advantage of the fact that Seattle and Portland need our power.
Right.
But it's going to be difficult. And the United States does a terrible job. They always say, well, we can also retrain. West Virginia is a case in point that we do a terrible job retraining. It's because the government doesn't care about working people. They just want to be able to end the industry that doesn't make them money and start a new one as quick as they can somewhere else. Right. So you have in the sense of Colstrip, and I think in the climate crisis, there is a path forward where you can care about the outcomes for working people and care about the climate crisis at once. They're both the same crisis. The system that brought us, yes, and I'm sorry, I just hit the screen because I'm so excited about this. You're right. The system that brings us low wages and makes us work and deems the people who get paid the least as essential workers during a pandemic is the same system that brought us a broken healthcare system, and is also the same system that is going to leave Colstrip out to dry. Mm-hmm. It's just all the same thing. It's not some grand unified theory. Look around you. Have you seen change in the last 10 years or 5 years, 4 years that has been helpful to us? I just don't. Mm-mm. And I think the trajectory we're on, pandemics, climate crises, it's always going to be working people and the people who are vulnerable who are going to get the short end of the stick. Mm-hmm. And Montanans, I think we need to remind ourselves that we are uniquely vulnerable. Mm-hmm. We're rural. Many of us, we're not very wealthy. We don't have large corporations here. There's no Boeing arguing for their help for, we don't have that. So I view hopefully my job as a congressman as to be a voice for that and a reminder that the power, there might be some power in Boeing, might be some power in coal, but there's bigger power in the voters in Montana. And that's a nonpartisan statement.
I completely agree with that.
Well, that's an easy one, right? What are you going to say?
Right. So just to kind of wrap this up and be on a lighter note, I understand that you found a dog recently.
Oh no! You want me to get him?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. He doesn't return. Okay, so I found this dog. Everybody, I was hiking. He was abandoned. He went. I put it on there like, hey, does anyone know whose dog this is? And 6 million people viewed the post, and like 200,000 people liked it. I have people sending me like, there's a guy who does Zen training who wants to do Zen training over the phone for my dog. It's like, I don't even get Zen training. Like, anyway, but he doesn't respond to his call. So like, let me see. I called him Gary. 1 second. Hey, Gary, are you under me? Oh, he's right here. Okay, 1 second. Oh, dude, don't knock that over. Come here. Okay, wait, have I been gone too long?
Nope.
Oh, wait, here he is. Okay, so Gary was abandoned. He's covered in hair and burrs and pine resin, and we've been cutting that out of him. And
well, I think you found a good home.
He's passing out in my arms. Hey, Mitch, I really appreciate you doing this. And I know you do a lot of work for the Democrats in Billings and at MSUB. And it's stuff that if I'd had the thoughtfulness, but when I was younger to do, I would have done, but I didn't. And we just, all Democrats and anyone else you interview here is gonna have a dog on my lap. Sorry, is thankful, even if they don't say it, for the work that people like you do. It's because it's so vital, and we can't keep losing, and you make it easier for us to keep winning.
Elected across the board in the state, so
yeah. Well, There we go.
All right, thank you so much, Tom, for your time.
Hey, thank you. Take care. Okay, stay healthy.
You too. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Maybe.